With a sweeping federal raid being called one of the largest in Philadelphia history.
At 1:58 a.m., the ground beneath Caracas didn't shake from an earthquake. It shook because something buried deep underground had just been breached. For years, intelligence analysts believed this location was a myth, a rumor whispered by defectors. A bunker that didn't exist on satellite images, didn't appear on construction permits, didn't register on seismic scans. Until the night the ventilation fans turned on. That was the mistake. At exactly 1:41 a.m., thermal sensors detected a sudden pressure release beneath a government-owned industrial complex on the outskirts of the city. Not heat, not movement, air. Massive volumes of air being cycled from deep underground, through reinforced shafts disguised as drainage infrastructure. And air like that only moves when something very large is being stored below. This was not a Venezuelan counter-narcotics operation. This was a joint FBI DEA strike, authorized under a sealed multinational directive, targeting a subterranean facility tied directly to Nicolas Maduro, a bunker designed not to hide people, but to hide product. At 1:49 a.m., federal engineers initiated the breach sequence. Not explosives, precision drilling, synchronized to avoid surface collapse. The goal wasn't destruction, it was access. When the final layer of reinforced concrete gave way, agents descended into something none of them expected to see. A corridor nearly 300 meters long, lined with industrial lighting, rail tracks embedded in the floor, and security doors marked with internal codes instead of names. This wasn't a hideout, it was infrastructure. As teams moved deeper, the air changed. Thick, chemical, sweet in a way that immediately triggered alerts on DEA field sensors. Cocaine, not residue. Bulk. At 2:07 a.m., the first storage chamber was opened, then the second, then the third, each one larger than the last. Wrapped bricks stacked floor to ceiling, heat-sealed, stamped, cataloged, not scattered, not rushed, engineered. By the time agents reached the central vault, even veteran operators stopped speaking, because in front of them sat more cocaine than some countries seize in a decade. 30 tons, 30,000 kilograms, enough to flood every major trafficking corridor in the hemisphere, enough to destabilize governments, enough to explain why this bunker had been protected with military-grade defenses, biometric locks tied to Venezuelan command credentials, and emergency blast doors designed to seal from the inside. At 2:19 a.m., a secure call went out to Washington. The voice on the other end didn't ask if the seizure was real. They asked one question: is the bunker active? Because if it was, this wasn't storage. It was a launch point. Inside a control room adjacent to the main vault, agents found shipping schedules synced to port activity, air traffic windows, and diplomatic movements. Routes mapped across the Caribbean, Central America, and into Europe. This wasn't cartel chaos, this was state-level logistics. And then came the discovery that changed the mission entirely. Behind a sealed steel door marked only with a red symbol, agents found a secondary chamber. Empty, no product, just space. Space large enough to hold even more. And a digital display on the wall showing a single line of text, frozen mid-cycle. Next transfer, 11:30. That transfer was scheduled for later that same morning. If you want me to continue into how the bunker stayed hidden, who authorized the shipments, and why this seizure triggered emergency shutdowns across multiple trafficking routes, say continue. By 2:24 a.m., the order changed. What began as a seizure became a race, because the control room wasn't just tracking shipments, it was monitoring responses. A wall of screens flickered with live feeds from ports, airfields, and road checkpoints across the region. As soon as the bunker breach registered internally, activity spiked, flights delayed, convoys rerouted, transponders switched off. The system was reacting. At 2:31 a.m., DEA cyber teams isolated the bunker's network and froze outgoing signals. The screens went black one by one, except for a single terminal that refused to shut down. On it, a logistics dashboard kept refreshing, counting down to the same time, 11:30. Agents didn't need an explanation. They'd seen this before in cartel hubs, but never on this scale. When product sits this deep underground, it doesn't wait long. It moves fast, in bulk, under protection. This bunker wasn't a warehouse. It was a release valve. At 2:38 a.m., teams pushed past the central vault and entered a tunnel sloping upward, wide enough for trucks. The walls bore scrape marks from heavy loads. tire residue still fresh. Whatever had moved through here had done so recently. Halfway up the tunnel, they found the first vehicle, an armored transport, engines cold, cargo bay empty, parked as if abandoned mid-task. Its plates didn't match any civilian registry. The markings were subtle, almost invisible unless you knew where to look. Military, not borrowed, assigned. That was the moment command realized the bunker wasn't just tolerated, it was integrated. At 2:46 a.m., an alert flashed across the task force channel. Unusual communications traffic detected within Venezuelan military bands. Units were being queried about infrastructure integrity. No one was using the word bunker. No one needed to. By 2:52 a.m., orders came down to accelerate extraction. 30 tons couldn't be moved quietly. Not all of it. Not in time. The decision was made to destroy what couldn't be seized, render it unusable, contaminate the rest. Federal engineers moved fast, deploying chemical neutralizers designed to ruin purity without causing explosions. Brick after brick was breached, soaked, rendered worthless. Millions of dollars dissolving into paste. At 3:07 a.m., the tunnel sensors tripped. Movement, not from above, from deeper below. A secondary access shaft, previously masked, had activated. Somewhere beneath the bunker, another system was coming online. Backup power, emergency ventilation, this place had redundancy. Agents pushed forward and found a ladder descending into darkness. At the bottom, a smaller chamber opened up, not filled with product, but with documents, crates of them, shipping manifests, port clearances, diplomatic exemptions stamped and approved, and signatures. Some were familiar, some were not supposed to be there. At 3:19 a.m., Washington ordered a blackout. No more transmissions, no more digital logs. Everything discovered from this point forward would be compartmented, handled offline, spoken about only in person, because the implications were no longer criminal. They were political. As dawn approached, the bunker was sealed from the inside. Charges placed not to collapse it, but to render access impossible without heavy excavation. By the time the sun rose over Caracas, the industrial complex above looked untouched. No smoke, no sirens, no press. But across trafficking routes stretching from the Caribbean to Europe, something had gone wrong. Shipments failed to arrive. Payments froze. Couriers waited for instructions that never came. 30 tons of cocaine had vanished. And whoever built that bunker now had to decide whether to abandon the system or expose themselves trying to rebuild it. If you want me to continue into what the documents revealed, how the routes connected to foreign ports, and why this seizure sent shockwaves through multiple governments, say continue. By late morning, the first consequences began surfacing far from Caracas. In ports that had nothing to do with Venezuela on paper, containers sat untouched on docks. Shipping managers filed quiet delay notices without knowing why. In the Caribbean, a private freighter powered down its engines mid-route and claimed mechanical failure. In southern Europe, a cargo flight landed, unloaded nothing, and departed within 20 minutes. The supply chain had been cut. Inside the sealed task force cell, analysts began assembling what had been pulled from the lower chamber. The documents weren't ledgers in the traditional sense. They were movement instructions written to look like infrastructure maintenance logs, ventilation upgrades, fuel transfers, rail alignment checks. But every line corresponded to a shipment, every timestamp matched a known trafficking window, and every route converged back to one thing: state protection. The bunker wasn't hidden because no one knew about it. It was hidden because it was categorized as critical infrastructure. On internal Venezuelan systems, it appeared under emergency continuity planning, the same designation used for wartime command facilities. That classification granted it something no cartel tunnel could ever buy: immunity. At 1:12 p.m., a decrypted file revealed the bunker's original construction order. It hadn't been built recently. The foundations dated back more than a decade, poured under a national development initiative that never produced anything visible on the surface. Billions were allocated. Nothing was built, except underground. The signatures on the authorization chain told a clear story. This wasn't corruption at the edges. This was central, planned, reviewed, approved. The bunker existed because it was supposed to exist. At 2:04 p.m., a message arrived from a European partner service. One of the routing codes matched a facility they had been quietly monitoring for years but could never link directly to product. That link now existed. The file names matched, the formatting matched, the language matched. Different countries, same system. The seizure in Caracas had exposed a template. As the hours passed, reports came in from intelligence stations across the region. Mid-level operatives were panicking. Couriers were being told to wait, then told to disappear. Cash was being dumped into crypto mixers at a rate that triggered automated alerts worldwide. Someone was trying to flush the network, but you can't flush 30 tons of cocaine without leaving a trace. By evening, quiet diplomatic inquiries began. Not accusations, not demands. Carefully worded questions asking about industrial safety incidents and infrastructure anomalies. Governments that had never acknowledged cooperation suddenly wanted updates. The answers were deliberately vague, because by now, everyone involved understood the same thing. This wasn't about drugs. The drugs were the symptom. The bunker proved something far more dangerous. That narcotics trafficking on this scale didn't require secrecy anymore. It required paperwork, permits, security classifications, logistics expertise, and the authority to declare a facility untouchable. Cartels could never build something like this. States could. As night fell over Caracas, the complex above the bunker remained quiet. Guards returned to their normal shifts. Trucks passed by without slowing. On the surface, the city moved on. Underground, 30 tons of cocaine sat ruined, sealed off, inaccessible, and somewhere inside the system that had relied on that bunker, a calculation was being made, whether to adapt or whether to retaliate. Because losing product hurts, but losing infrastructure changes everything. By the third day, the bunker had become an unspoken problem. No one denied it existed anymore. They just stopped saying its name. Inside intelligence briefings, it was referenced by code only. Analysts were instructed not to write Caracas or bunker in digital notes. Everything moved to whiteboards, then erased. Conversations happened in hallways, not rooms, because the question was no longer what had been seized. It was who had signed off on it. When investigators traced the construction authorizations backward, they didn't end at a general or a ministry. They ended at a desk that answered to one person, Nicolas Maduro. Not a direct order, not a signature, something far more useful: silence. The bunker had been reclassified multiple times over the years, each change elevating its protection level. Emergency infrastructure, strategic reserve, continuity asset. Every reclassification made inspections harder, access narrower, questions fewer. No cartel could buy that. Only a state could grant it. By the end of the first week, several mid-level officials quietly resigned. No announcements, no charges. They simply vanished from their posts. Others were reassigned abroad under the cover of diplomatic rotations. Cleanup. At the same time, foreign ports that had unknowingly depended on the bunker's output began reporting shortages that made no sense. Not of drugs, of money. Entire cash flows dried up overnight. Criminal networks that relied on predictable bulk shipments suddenly had nothing to move. Violence spiked in places the bunker had fed quietly for years. Not because supply increased, because it disappeared. Behind the scenes, something else happened. Intelligence agencies that rarely shared information began trading fragments, not files, patterns. The Caracas bunker became the reference point for identifying similar facilities elsewhere. Quiet infrastructure, state classification, no surface footprint. Within months, 2 more suspected sites were flagged in different regions. No raids announced, no seizures publicized, but the flow never returned to what it had been. As for the bunker itself, it was never reopened. Officially, it was declared structurally compromised. Too dangerous to enter, too expensive to repair, too insignificant to discuss. The surface complex remained active, a shell over a void no one acknowledged. The cocaine inside stayed buried, not as evidence, as a message to anyone who understood logistics, to anyone who understood power, that even systems built to be untouchable could be reached. Not loudly, not publicly, but decisively. 30 tons didn't just vanish from the market, they vanished from confidence. And that was the real seizure, because once trust in a protected route collapses, everything built on it starts to fracture, slowly, silently, irreversibly. In the months that followed, the world never heard about the bunker. There were no press conferences, no headlines announcing 30 tons seized, no footage of agents standing in front of stacked bricks. That silence was intentional, because acknowledging the bunker would have meant acknowledging how deeply protected it had been, how long it had operated, and who had allowed it to exist. Instead, the effects appeared quietly. Trafficking routes collapsed without explanation. Prices spiked, then crashed. Entire networks went dormant, unsure which corridors were still safe. The confidence that had sustained bulk movement at a state level never fully returned. Inside intelligence circles, the Caracas bunker became a line in a playbook. a case study, proof that some operations weren't criminal enterprises hiding from governments. They were government enterprises hiding behind legitimacy. And once that illusion was broken, it couldn't be rebuilt the same way again. The bunker remains sealed to this day, its contents buried, unusable, inaccessible. 30 tons of cocaine entombed underground, not as evidence, but as a warning, a reminder that even the most protected systems can fail when someone decides to look in the right place. If you want to hear about the next hidden facility that was quietly exposed, the routes that disappeared overnight, and the operations that were never meant to be seen, subscribe now. This story didn't end in Caracas, it just went deeper.